Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Texas Hill Country Fishing Report with Greg Welander of Upstream on the Fly. How you doing, Greg?
Well, hi, Marvin. It's not too bad. It's especially in regards to the heat. Considering we're in June, we're having some very pleasant days. I think the last time we spoke 2 weeks ago, we had a couple days reaching 100 degrees. I was a little concerned. But luckily, we got back in the high 80s and low 90s in the Texas Hill Country. So we just finished a week this past week with some of the lowest humidity levels, considering it was in June. I saw like 17 to 30% humidity, which when it was high of 80 to 90 on the thermometer, it actually was feeling pretty good outside. And there's an old saying. It says, it's not the heat, but the humidity. So we've been having some decent weather.
Well, that's great. And more importantly, I'm sure you've had a chance to go get the oil in your truck changed after all of your road tripping and presenting you were doing the last time I talked to you.
Well, that's right. Marvin, I'm driving Toyota product now. So I go like 10,000 miles before I have to get an oil change. But yeah, I know what you mean. I have been burned up and down the road doing some fishing though. Over the last 2 weeks, I've been out on Lake Travis, and I've also been spending a great deal of time out on the Welander River. Fishing on Lake Travis has been actually producing some nice Guadalupe bass in the morning on top waters. And I've been fishing the main lake, high bluffs, so that kind of keeps the sun off the water till about 10 in the morning. And then after the sun gets up, I'll switch over and start throwing some streamers. The lake up on Travis has actually gone up 4 feet since I was, I think, last talking about it, and that was 3 weeks ago. We had some rain, so that's a good thing. So currently, the Lake Travis is about 9 feet above or below pool, which was better than what we started back in the spring. I think we were down to about 11 feet below pool. So that rain we've had about 3-4 weeks ago definitely has been a good shot in the arm for water. But I had some guide trips that I was running out on Milano, some wet wading trips. So I've been out on Milano a lot recently. There had been some rain that had hit that watershed also 3 weeks ago. So there was a small rise in the flow. Which is a good thing as we get into summer. The water clarity was okay. It was still clearing up a little bit, but the fish were responding. And I've checked out several locations over the last couple of weeks. I was driving in from the west, and I wanted to stop in the town of Orlando and go check out the water below the dam. There's a little low water dam. And the water actually has been coming out the bottom of the dam versus going over the top. I had mentioned that a few weeks ago, and that was doing the dredging. They've been doing some dredging on the little lake there in downtown Llano. So the water's coming out below the dam. So when you're looking downstream from, say, the highway or the dam, the water's all running off to the right, which is basically where the gates are underneath the dam. So typically, generally expect some water over on the left side too, because there's an island in the middle and the two streams kind of join up downstream a couple hundred yards. Well, there's no water on the left. It's all over on the right. So if you want to go access that, I'd access it from the south side. There's a park over there if you wanted to go downstream. But the Llano's been producing a lot of small Guadalupe bass, 6 to 8 inches, which isn't big, but that's great news though, because the river's been rebounding from the severe flood that we had back in October of 2018. I mean, it was one of those, I've heard where it's even possibly a 1,000-year flood. I mean, it was just devastating to all life, from aquatic life to the fish. We've been catching some green sunfish and also a few red breast sunfish, but the bass actually have been outnumbering the sunfish, which is normally the reverse. Normally catch more sunfish than bass. But what's also been interesting is every time I've been on the Llano the last 2 weeks, I've been catching a catfish or two, or my clients have caught a couple catfish. So that's always kind of fun and exciting because the catfish does have a tussle. It does want to put up a fight. But, since there's been so many small bass being caught, I knew that there had to be some bigger fish somewhere. I mean, it makes sense. So on a recent guide trip, we'd transversed through some deep water. I mean, we're talking water up to our armpits just to get over to some areas that looked like it was holding some bigger fish, and definitely was. I had a client hook up with a very nice largemouth bass, and it was his first fish of that size that he's ever had on the fly rod. He was kind of a newbie in the fly fishing world, and unfortunately the fish broke him off, so we didn't get a picture of that. But like he was saying, that's going to keep me coming back. I mean, it was pretty exciting for him. He really learned a lot, and he enjoyed being out on the Llano. An additional update on our Highland Lakes, I'm starting to see some midday surface activity. So at first I thought it was some white bass, but actually it's largemouth, and the largemouth are chasing shad up on top. So bring a pair of binoculars or keep your eyes open because, during the middle of the day when the winds are fairly calm, you could see it going on, and they'll hit anything from a clouser to top water. But, the San Gabriel River also has been fishing well. There's the lower Colorado east of Austin. It's been fishing okay as long as you're timing it in between releases. So as far as being able to float it with a raft, it's a little tough right now, but taking a jet boat over there and timing it during the day, kind of doing a half a day trip has been okay. The water's a little higher, but it'll top off up to a couple thousand by 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So it's all about timing. And, my lower section that I fish a lot out of my raft with some private land access has not been working well due to the higher releases coming out of Longhorn Dam in downtown Austin. But let's talk about tips and techniques. So the lakes, anything shad, any shad-related bait fish for topwater action, and even yellow poppers are working. So streamers, well, anything resembling shad. It's like the fish are keyed in on shad right now. So clouser minnows are all working, and intermediate lines. So when you switch over to streamers as the day goes on, I definitely switch over to intermediate lines or full sinking lines because the fish are starting to kind of get in their summer patterns. But it's exciting though when they start to chase shad up on top. So you've got to keep that floating line handy and have a clouser or even a topwater popper on so they'll bust the heck out of it. But as far as our rivers, small streams, out on the Llano, early in the morning, I've been doing okay with grasshoppers. So, grasshoppers, my go-to pattern is the Llano bug because it basically resembles a hopper or even a small frog. And any yellow popper, boogle bugs with the rubber legs, I just love yellow boogle bugs. But, the damsel, dragonfly, nymphs, it's just been kind of okay for streamers. The Llano has been doing very well with white baitfish streamers. So nothing fancy, just as long as it's white and it looks like and swims like a river minnow. So a clouser minnow on white is working well. But I think all those floods that had happened out on the Llano had hurt some of the aquatic life. So I'm not seeing as many dragonflies and damselfly adults flying around. I do see a few, but the fish just quite aren't keying in on the damsel nymphs like I typically see at this time of year. So clouser minnows in white. But that's about it, Marvin. That's kind of how it's been going in the Texas Hill Country over the last couple of weeks.
Got it. And so when you fish for dragonflies and damsels, do you like to fish blue poppers or do you like to fish something that's a little bit more realistic?
Well, a blue popper is a great top water for this time of year due to the damsels and the dragonflies. But then, as the sun gets up, I'll switch to some of the various aquatic versions of those bugs. So basically in its nymph stage, so kind of olive damselfly nymphs. There's a lot of different patterns out there. One of the local patterns here in Central Texas is called the swamp monster. So I like to tie the swamp monster in an olive, and I think the original pattern was black. It was developed back in the days when there was a fly shop in downtown Austin. So that was called the Austin Angler, and it's long gone. But one of the guys that worked there had spent many lunch breaks going over to Town Lake, which is what it was called back then, and came up with the fly that we know as the swamp monster. So this basically is size 8, some rubber legs, olive, little wing and a little tail out of marabou, and it works pretty well as your nymph for your aquatic version of your damsels and dragonfly nymphs.
Very neat, and to kind of help people that are not, maybe big stillwater anglers, to help them understand kind of what's going on when you're fishing top early and what drives the fish to structure later in the day and then brings them back to the top in the evening. Yeah,
so a bass, whether it be a largemouth or a Guadalupe bass, it doesn't like light. Okay, so when your low light periods, which of course would be your mornings and then your evenings, the fish will come up shallow looking for food. But as your day progresses and your sun gets up high in the sky, and say you don't have structure, you don't have trees, you don't have logs, laydowns, the fish are going to start holding a little deeper. So at that time of day, typically a floating line will access about 2 to 3 feet of your water depth. So putting an intermediate line on, or even going to a full sink or sink tip, will help you get down below that 2 to 3 feet, water column. So your fish will start to kind of go into your deeper water depths and find some structure. So that's a little tougher to be able to go after them with a floating line, except in the morning, of course, and then in the evening.
Got it. And, folks, we love questions on the Articulate Fly. If you have a question for Greg, if you'll send it to us on the Articulate Fly Facebook page, if we use your question, I'll send you some Articulate Fly swag, and then you're going to get it into a drawing for some cool stuff that Greg's going to put together from some of the brands that he reps. And before I let you hop, Greg, why don't you let folks know where they can find you so they can book you and sweat in the Texas heat and catch some bass?
Yeah, so definitely find me on my website, which is upstreamonthefly.com, and then on social media, both on Facebook and Instagram, as Upstream on the Fly.
Well, that's awesome. Well, listen, folks, you owe it to yourself before it gets super duper hot to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Greg.
Thanks, Marvin.